So
Yeah, go ahead.
do we want to move to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the next section I'm calling making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting one. I'm really kind of curious on your opinion. Um, so in a situation where your opponent needs to make a decision, and I'm again
Mm-hmm.
going to use the game against Knuckles because it was really tangible in my opinion. So the scenario was in this instance, he needed to decide if he was going to barrel roll Soontir with the tractor beam or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we had given it a good like minute and a half where he was thinking. And I was like, okay. And then he's like, I'm sorry, I need to take more time to make this decision. And I said, no, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down. The decision took, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe around 5 minutes to come to the conclusion to not barrel roll Soontir. And at the end, I ran out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and thought about this and was like, wait, after the game, I looked to the judge and actually at the end of the game, I was like, I looked to the judge and like, look, he acknowledged to me multiple times in this game, especially this instance, that he apologized for taking a long time to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get an extension of a round or two? Because my opponent has acknowledged he is absorbing exorbitant amounts of time beyond what is the norm. And the judge was like, no. And I looked at him and was like, even though my opponent is saying multiple times, like, what do I need to do to get an extension? Well, you should call us over right then. And my thought was, wait, so every time my opponent's going to take more time, I need to call you guys over to make that okay to see if I can get an extension? And after talking to some people, I more or less have my understanding currently is that I should take the approach of when a long decision is being made, after a minute and a half, I need to look at my opponent and say, you need to make a decision. It's been a while. I understand this is a tough decision, but I need you to make a decision. And I'm curious, what is your stand, or how do you recommend approaching this?
Literally what you just said. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll talk about asking for time extensions, but yeah, I agree with the judge. Like that's not for the things that qualify for time extensions, that's not what I would have also qualified as a time extension.
Okay.
So we all agree that some things are harder, but when one person is ahead of the other person, there is, again, this is sort of my other personal hill between air quotes mobile fortressing / stalling. The other one is slow play. And slow play is the unintentional one in terms of the rules document. Slow play means stalling is the intentional one. Slow play is the unintentional effect, meaning like it doesn't mean that you're tending to do it. You're just doing a normal play. You're trying to set your dial, but you're still being slow. That's still bad. It just isn't as bad. Like you're not doing it intentionally. It still has an effect. And yeah, I think the answer is you have to speed up. I actually did my MindLink Worlds. I actually did that. I was a win and in round, the last round of Swiss, and I told my opponent that you need to speed up. He was super unhappy when I told him to do that. He sped up and lost.
Do you feel you were incorrect though by saying you need?
Not even remotely. He was slow. He was playing double regen. What do you think happened? Like, I also don't think he was playing in bad faith. I think he was playing a list that accidentally helps him when he's slow.
Oh, okay.
So that's the problem. I never got the impression that he was playing in bad faith. I don't think he was slowing down because he was playing double regen. I just think that like I was pressuring him really hard and I made his life hard and he didn't know what to do and he froze. But by coincidence, that helps his win condition and that's still not okay. Like it doesn't make it okay because his life is hard. Sure. Right? Like that's sort of where I'm getting at is like the game is tough decisions. So as long as I'm still making my decision, you're not on the clock. So as an opponent.
So let's say here's another scenario that happened to me at one of our hyperspaces a while ago. It was the first round. And I was playing a 6-ship or 7-ship separatist list. And I was playing 4 ships resistance. I had all 4 of my dials set for a minute. And he was still looking at his first dial. I went over and I grabbed the judge and I said, look, I have all 4 of my dice set. There are still 24 minutes left on the clock. He is currently up on points. I don't know if he's trying to slow play, but I have all 4 of my dials set and I have waited a minute. Can you please tell him to hurry up? So he sat by and he did. He right away, he was like, you need to speed up. And he had to say it 3 more times over the course of the next 3 rounds, which is fine. And I think the player wasn't deliberately trying to be slow, but I felt if I don't do something about this, I'm only getting 2 more turns out of this game. Instead, we got 5 turns out of that game and I won. But I had to mentally take a note and be like, holy crap, he's only on his first dial. Instead of me saying, I need you to speed up, I just immediately went to the judge. Is that wrong of me? Is that an approach I should
No,
take?
not really. No, that's so the problem with slow plays I don't have is as elegant of an answer.
Okay.
Because this is inherently more combative, right?
It is.
And this is I don't have as good of an answer because, like I said, it's inherently more antagonistic. There's no way around that aspect of it. So, like in the game with Knuckles, where he spent more time, like he's trying to do his best. He's probably tired. He's overloaded. It was probably a tough call. I don't know the real amount of time taken. Maybe he took too much time. Maybe he didn't. But you felt he took too much time. And that's the key thing where I would have probably prodded him at least at a minimal or called a judge. Like that's the key thing at this point where at this point, especially, so I play the 7-ship, I play 8-ship swarm. Like I like that list a lot. I do feel the problem with that list is I also would recommend it to new players. The thing I would tell new players is just make decisions. Like you're going to lose games with it. And that's super okay. But like the worst thing you can do to your opponent is like accidentally stall with the list. If that makes sense, right? Like that's the most negative play experience for everyone is to accidentally stall with a swarm. Right? And people do it all the time. And that's a problem. It's a real problem, and I don't like it. And people do it with aces. I mean, people do it with every list. I don't want to pick on anything. Like you can do it with your 4-ship swarm. Like, man, this one ship's in a really weird position. I don't know what to do. Like D talks about analysis. Everyone has their analysis paralysis.
I've noticed personally in situations that I am a little bit more lenient are if you're dealing with an advanced sensors or supernatural ship. Like for example, my BB-8 Poe. Sometimes, and I know this because I played it, I have to visualize my tree, and my tree is a bit more complex than a normal tree because of the pre-position. And those are the few instances where I'm really tolerant with someone, because it's like, look, I get it. You have to figure this out, and it actually does take longer than making a normal decision. But even then, I think it comes down to how do you, when you have hit that threshold personally, or if you set a 30-second or a minute timer, how do you not combatively have that interaction? Because normally when you say something like that to someone, they're probably going to get upset or offended to some degree, right?
So I see a question in the chat too. So the problem is that I've changed my decisions. So you were saying that while that's harder, they made that choice and it almost inherently leads to their win condition.
Okay.
So I'm not sure it's actually okay. So it's also like I like Whisper. I still like Whisper or Phantoms, right? Phantoms have the same problem. I have to figure out where I'm decloaked. But like the slower I am, probably the better off I am, whether I'm meant to be or not.
Okay.
And I'm not sure it's okay in a tournament setting. Like if you're a newer player and you're trying to learn these things, like you can like, hey, I'm sorry. But even then you're like taking away from someone else's enjoyment, even a casual night. I would just say you got to make some decisions. Like, and so you need to be, and I get it, man. Like Phantoms play weird, right? Especially if you're not playing in an open board space, right? Like you're trying to figure out where you're going. You got to get some reps in. Supernatural ships, advanced sensors, like pre-dial movement is weird. I agree. So to some extent, like going with the overly long decisions on like tough rounds, my argument is if it's a tough round, it should be tough. It's like the true test of a tough round is it's a tough round for both players. Otherwise, if it's just a tough round for one player, that player's just losing or just winning. If they're just winning, it's not a tough round for them unless they're winning but barely winning or just trying to hold on to a lead but tenuously. And then the slow play is helping them, right? And then it's, even if it's by, again, it doesn't, I'm not accusing of stalling at this point, right? Because they might be, but I'm not sure that a lot of people are actually actively thinking, well, my win con, if I think long enough, I just accidentally win here. I think they're just like nervous about losing, right? Like, hey man, I'm up, but I see how I could lose here. Man, if I go here, well, what if you did this? Okay, well, what if I go here? Like they're doing the analysis paralysis, right? But by accident, they're winning because they're slowing the game down. Does that make sense? Especially with the advanced sensors, especially with the supernatural. They're accidentally winning by doing that, right? And so it doesn't make it okay. And you're like, hey man, like I need you to speed up, like you're ahead, and like, you know, like my dials are set. Now here's the thing. You can't just slam your dials down and expect your opponent to like, then you're on the clock. So this is a weird thing where this is the problem with slow play. This is why a judge sort of needs to look at it. Mm-hmm. So let's say that I'm the person that's worried about time. So I have 4 ships left and you have like 2, and I'm worried about time. So I go dial, like you're still doing combat, and I go dials down, and I'm just looking at you. I'm not, my opponents are not truly on the clock yet. I haven't like they still get probably like a minute or 2 at least.
Yep.
Right. But let's say we go to full dial turn, right? I haven't set any pre-dials. I set my dials, set them down. They don't get 2 more minutes after that. Does that make sense? Like that's what I'm talking about, the kosherness of it, right? It doesn't make it okay. If it doesn't mean even if I have less ships in them, it doesn't make it okay. And that's my point, right? Mm-hmm. Paul he didn't have a bright line. He used the idea of your opponent's board, it's probably not okay.
Fair, yeah.
He was using mannerisms, body language. Another thing was like once he started seeing the body language, he would use a timer, a literal stopwatch. Once someone, again, he wouldn't let someone pre-dial someone, right? So there's context. That's why he was watching the board. It was contextual. Mm-hmm. Again, not a bright line. That's the problem with slow play. There's no clear bright line for this. But he would stopwatch people. And then he would be like, you need to set your dials. You need to set your dials. You're playing a little too slow. And then he was willing to give warning points, but he said it never came to that, because once you start prodding people, the answer was they were not playing in bad faith. They were just, like analysis paralysis. And once you prod them enough, they move along. They move along. They make a decision to move. But yeah, the answer. So anyway, that's doing the context. So how do you deal with it? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure yet. I'm sort of figuring that out on my as well. I think the safer answer might actually be call the judge.
Right away?
Because the answer is, if you try and handle it at your table, first of all, I suspect that antagonism is about the same. The antagonism is going to be about the same, right? The person's not going to like it. At worst, you get a neutral response or an apologetic response. Oh, I didn't mean to be slow. Sorry, man. That's good, right? That's positive.
Yep. But
chances are you're going to get a neutral to negative. But the judge didn't see it. And what you need is a judge to start seeing it, because they need the context, because you also might be wrong. So here's the thing. The judge helps protect both players, because what if you are actually trying to overly speed your opponent? We're assuming that you're correctly calling slow play. What if you're not? So the judge protects both players again in this situation. So I suspect the right answer is you need a judge. I think that's probably the right answer, because it actually protects both players in this case, that you can't speed dial someone on accident, because that's what in your mind, I need this time. Oh my God, I'm being slow played. Dial, because I've done that. You've done that, right? Oh, I'm behind on time. I'm going to speed dial. Not because I'm trying to speed my opponent, because I just here's my decision. I know what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean my opponent's slow playing me. It just means I know what I'm doing, right? And that doesn't mean that I can yell at my opponent because they haven't set their dials yet. So yeah, I think the judge is probably the right way to go, because I don't think you're going to be able to get out. This is far closer to a zero sum.
Well, and that leads us to so we also talk about extensions, because when you're calling a judge to intervene like that, so like I said, it kind of leads us to our next section. So asking for an extension, they haven't really clearly said, right? It's at least to my experience, what does and does not constitute an extension. The only times I've really seen an extension given is if a judge is like, I'm sorry, I took a long time. You guys have an extra round or something.
All right. So here's my general rule of thumb it's a little simpler than that, I think. So there is no formal rule of time extensions. So my answer is basically anytime you have a judge interaction that takes longer than about 2 minutes, I would just preemptively ask for a time extension, but do not ask for a specific amount of time.
Okay.
Do not be so bold as to ask for a specific amount of time. Simply ask politely, may we have a time extension? Is it okay that we have a time extension? Chances are the answer is yes. and you let the judge decide what the time extension is.
Okay.
All right. And usually they will not tell you I would say, actually, I don't want to say usually, I'm about 50-50 on them telling you what your time extension is.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll tell me, and I've never had more than an 8-minute extension.
Okay. Normally, I've just seen like you guys will have one extra round, although later on we'll get to an extension.
I've never had anyone tell me a specific amount of rounds. I've only had the most I've ever had is an 8-minute extension.
Okay.
And that's because of and that's only through the culmination of 2 judge interactions, because I've had to ask for it twice.
Okay.
In the same game. So I would just preemptively tell you that if you have a judge call that takes longer than about 2 minutes, and that's usually like a complicated arc check. A very complicated arc check will take like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But even I want air quote simple arc check, but if it requires a judge, even a simple arc check is like a 2-minute arc check, right?
Yep,
because you're holding things down and you're marking things. So a simple arc check for a judge is still complicated, right? It's probably a 2-minute arc check. If you're asking for an interaction, you don't need a time extension unless they had to go look something up. If they had to go look something up, ask for a time extension, right? If they had to go find the marshal for something because they needed to go ask for some weird thing. By default, if you had probably anything that felt longer than 2 minutes, ask for a time extension. But I don't know the etiquette because they don't have to give you anything. I have never asked for a specific time extension.
Okay.
I've just asked for this specific, or a specific number. I've simply asked for time extensions politely. I've also never been denied one. Ever. I mean, they might have only given me like 2 minutes, right? Like, it doesn't mean they give me the full amount of time they took either. But in theory, they're trying to restore as much of the whole point of a time extension is their goal is to restore the game state as they took away from you. To restore as close to the 75 minutes that you play a real game. And the secret is half the time, maybe, I don't know the real number, Chris would have a better answer. Most of the time they give time extensions, it's moot.
Yeah, it usually is. Yep.
Right? It just makes the players at the table feel better that that in their heads, they got to play the real game. Right?
To its full conclusion or whatever.
Well, in their head, we had the potential to play the real game. Oh, someone won way before time. Easy. Right? It makes everyone feel better. Rarely does that time extension ever matter. Because even when your game goes to time, you have to literally be the last table to turn in your score slip. Because even if you beat the other players that didn't get time extensions but are still wrapping up, your time extension functionally was moot, which has happened to me before. I've had time extension and still beaten some of those slow tables that didn't have time extensions because their last round was so long for whatever godforsaken reason. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that's okay.
But that's my general default logic on that.